24%. This isn't a dry statistic. This is the point at which the life-sustaining system for nearly 40 million people begins to stop beating. Mainstream media tells you everything is fine. They show pictures of reservoirs overflowing after the record-breaking atmospheric rivers of 2024 and tell you to relax, water your lawn, and forget the nightmare. But they're wrong, or they're deliberately hiding the truth. The recovery you're seeing is just a trick of nature. Behind that deep blue water, an outdated 20th century system is being crushed by the harsh realities of the 21st century. If you think this is a problem for California's hydraulic engineers, you're wrong. When the heart of the Central Valley Project falters, the consequences reach your dinner table in Texas, Florida, or New York. It's in soaring supermarket bills, rolling blackouts during scorching 110-degree Fahrenheit heat waves, and the fact that the foundation of agriculture, which supplies a quarter of America's food, is teetering on the brink of collapse. In this video, we're not talking about ordinary droughts. We're exposing the blindness of predictive supercomputers and why a full dam could be the harbinger of the greatest infrastructure collapse in Western history. And I'll show you the evidence of a $1.8 billion plan that authorities are betting on a gamble that could cost the annihilation of an entire culture and the last remaining creatures of the McCloud River. The system has cracked, and what you're about to see is the final warning that we can no longer ignore. To understand why the white lime circle at the beginning of the video is so frightening, you have to understand what it represents. In 1945, the United States completed the Shasta Dam under the operation of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. At the time, it was considered a wonder of the modern world. A massive concrete wall, 602 feet high, blocked four major rivers: Sacramento, Pitt, McCloud, and Squaw Creek. This was not just a construction project, it was a declaration that humanity had the power to subdue nature, to make the raging rivers serve its ambitions. Lake Shasta has a massive storage capacity, 4.5 million acres. Imagine, if you poured all this water into standard Olympic swimming pools, you would need 1.8 million pools to hold it all. This figure makes Lake Shasta the cornerstone of the entire Central Valley Project, CVP. It acts as a giant pressure regulator for the entire state. It stores water from the most violent storms in the north, and then, during the scorching summer months, it precisely releases gallons of water to nourish vast almond orchards and keep the taps running for millions of homes in San Francisco and Los Angeles. It's not just drinking water, it's energy. With a capacity of up to 710 megawatts, the Shasta Dam is a flexible power source that stabilizes the California grid whenever demand peaks. For over 80 years, everything has seemed to have worked perfectly. We built a civilization, an agricultural empire, and megacities on the assumptions that this valve would always be full, and that weather cycles would always repeat themselves in the orderly fashion that engineers in 1940 had documented. But there was a fatal flaw in this design. The entire world's most complex water system was built on 20th century climate data, a period we considered stable. We created a trap of control. We believed concrete could replace the volatility of the sky. But as we entered an era of decades-long droughts and record-breaking storms, this pressure valve began to reveal its extreme fragility. And the only savings account keeping this reservoir alive is beginning to be drained from the highest peaks of the Sierra Nevada. There's a truth that hydraulic engineers understand but rarely speak. The Shasta Dam is just a soulless concrete tank. It doesn't generate water itself. Its soul, and the lifeblood of all of California, lies hundreds of miles to the east, on the towering peaks of the Sierra Nevada. Welcome to the true water bank of the West. Normally, California doesn't rely on summer rains. The state survives thanks to snow. In winter, the Sierra Nevada acts as a giant natural reservoir, storing billions of tons of water in the form of snow. Experts call this the snow water equivalent. Under the old climate regime, this bank functioned perfectly. Snow accumulated in winter and melted slowly and steadily throughout spring and summer. It provides up to 30% of the state's annual water supply right when agricultural demand is at its peak. The Shasta Dam was precisely designed to receive this slow payment from nature. But in recent decades, the operating rules of this water bank have been completely disrupted. The warming atmosphere has created a devastating phenomenon: aridification. Instead of accumulating into thick ice to store for the summer, water now falls as rain. Instead of melting slowly, unusual heat waves cause snow to melt early and massively. When water flows into Lake Shasta too quickly and too early in winter, outdated forecasting models become blind. To ensure the dam's safety from flooding, engineers are forced to release water. And what is the result? By the time summer actually arrives, the mountain's reserve account is empty. We have thrown our lifeline into the ocean because we cannot store it properly. In 2015, a shocking study from the University of Arizona revealed a horrifying truth. Snow levels in the Sierra Nevada had reached their lowest point in 500 years. Based on tree ring data, scientists confirmed that no one living on this planet had ever witnessed California's water bank being emptied to such an extent. No farmer with 50 years of experience, no seasoned government engineer could have prepared for this. Because it was beyond any scenario the 1945 infrastructure system was designed to handle. The system had already broken down from the mountaintop before it even reached the bottom of the lake. And when the snowbank officially declared bankruptcy in 2021, the Shasta pressure regulator had fallen into a state that can only be described in one word: suicide. The water level began to drop at an uncontrollable rate. And this time, it wasn't just a number on a chart. It was the beginning of a catastrophic domino effect that no supercomputer model could prevent. 2021 wasn't a sudden shock. It was the result of a devastating stacking effect. California had just emerged from the historic 2012 to 2016 drought, and before the system had fully recovered, a second super drought struck. And this time, Lake Shasta, our most fortified stronghold, began bleeding in real time. Look at the numbers that irrigation engineers watched in horror that summer. In August 2021, the lake was at 38% capacity. Just 30 days later in September, it had fallen to 26%, and finally, the number stopped at an unbelievable 24%. When Lake Shasta dropped to 24%, it wasn't just water loss. It was the disappearance of the safety margin. This enormous reservoir was designed to withstand drought years. But it wasn't designed to contend with an atmosphere so thirsty that it evaporates every gallon of water the moment it touches the ground. In Redding, California, people stand on the shore watching the lake shrink each day. The marinas have to be relocated repeatedly until there's no longer any road to use. Ghost bridges and old roads from the 1940s, buried hundreds of feet beneath the lake's surface, suddenly emerged like specters from the past, reminding us that nature is reclaiming what we have tried to take. And that's when the bathtub circles become most apparent. The white chalky layer on the cliffs isn't simply salt. It's calcium and mineral compounds deposited over decades, now exposed to the harsh sunlight like a death line. This white scar, as tall as a 20-story building, tells us where the water level should have been and how much we've lost. It's a message written in minerals and rock that our system has exceeded its design limits. The worst part is the feeling of helplessness. You can access government websites and watch the lake's elevation drop inch by inch, minute by minute. This is no longer climate change in scientific journals. This is infrastructure collapse unfolding before the eyes of 40 million people. When Shasta Lake no longer has enough water to sustain itself, the dominoes begin to fall. And the first to fall is the very thing that feeds the entire United States. When Lake Shasta dropped to 24%, an alarm bell rang in the control rooms of Sacramento. It wasn't just a warning about water levels, it was a warning about the survival of the Central Valley, the agricultural heart, not just of California, but of the entire United States. To understand the gravity of the situation, you need to know this. The Central Valley provides a quarter of the food supply for the entire United States, from almonds and pistachios to leafy greens, fruits, and tomatoes. A third of the produce on American dinner tables, from New York to Florida, is actually nourished by the water flowing from the Shasta Dam. In 2021, the system delivered a cruel verdict: 0%. That's the amount of water many farmers receive from CVP. Imagine you're a farmer who has spent their entire life cultivating this land. You receive a phone call informing you that this year, you won't have a single gallon of water from the federal system. No water means no crops. No crops means bankruptcy. In desperation, many have chosen the last resort, digging deep into the ground to extract the last drops of groundwater. But nature always finds a way to collect its debts. Overpumping groundwater has caused the Central Valley to subside at an alarming rate, in some places sinking more than a foot per year, twisting and cracking the very concrete water channels we built. Agriculture isn't a tap you can turn on and off at will. With annuals like lettuce or tomatoes, you can choose not to plant for a season. But with perennials like almonds or grapes, the state's billion-dollar economic powerhouses, you can't stop watering. One season of water shortage will kill an entire orchard that took 10 years to grow. This rigidity of the agricultural system, combined with climate instability, has created a deadly trap. When Lake Shasta can no longer supply cold water, the system is forced to choose: either save the farms, or save the cities, or save the ecosystem. And in this battle, no one truly wins. Don't mistake this for a story unique to California farmers. When the fields in the Central Valley dry up, America's food supply chain breaks down at its core. Vegetable prices skyrocket. Your supermarket bill in any state begins to reflect the depletion of Lake Shasta. We are witnessing the collapse of an economic model based on the assumption of cheap and abundant water forever. And while we are scrambling for every gallon of water for irrigation, another crisis is silently escalating in the power grid, the very thing that keeps modern life from falling into chaos. When the agricultural domino falls, it triggers a direct ripple effect on the power grid that stretches across California. There's a cruel paradox we often overlook. The very heat that depletes reservoirs is what makes us crave energy more than ever. The Shasta Dam isn't just a wall holding water, it's a massive 710 megawatt power plant. Ideally, it could power 600,000 homes simultaneously. But hydropower doesn't operate on quantity of water, it operates on pressure. Physics doesn't negotiate. When the water level at Lake Shasta dropped by 24% in 2021, the pressure exerted on the turbines decreased significantly. This means that even if you release the same amount of water, the amount of electricity generated is far less than normal. At this point, the Shasta hydroelectric plant was no longer an energy monster. It had become a rickety machine struggling to breathe. And this was the crux of the system's collapse. California lost its most resilient source of hydroelectric power precisely as the heat domes pushed temperatures up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. When hydroelectric power, a clean and cheap energy source, was paralyzed, the California power grid went into red alert. To save the system from complete collapse, the state was forced to activate older, more expensive, and polluting gas-fired power plants, or buy electricity from neighboring states at exorbitant prices. This is when you feel the heat of Lake Shasta in your pocket. Electricity bills skyrocketed, and the threat of rolling blackouts became a constant nightmare. Power outages in California are more than just a loss of light. That's when hospitals have to run backup generators. when air conditioning systems shut down in the midst of potentially deadly heat. Our infrastructure, designed to withstand single shocks, is now writhing under double pressure. Less water to generate electricity, but more electricity needed to survive the drought. But while humans grapple with air conditioners and electricity bills, another entity has no backup option. At the foot of the Shasta Dam in the Sacramento River, an ancient organism is facing an irreconcilable biological threshold. Because when there isn't enough water to power the turbines, there isn't enough to keep life going either. The third domino is beginning to fall. And this time, the price is the extinction of a species. While power engineers grapple with the numbers on the grid, a silent disaster is unfolding at the foot of the Shasta Dam. Winter-run Chinook salmon, one of America's rarest and most endangered species, don't care about food prices or electricity bills. They only care about one number: 56 degrees Fahrenheit, 13.3 degrees Celsius. This is a biologically non-negotiable threshold. Since the Shasta Dam was completed in 1945, the species has been deprived of access to the frigid, high-altitude streams of the McCloud River. They are forced to spawn downstream in the Sacramento River, where it is already too hot for their eggs to survive. Under normal conditions, the Shasta Dam acts as a giant cooling machine. Thanks to its large capacity, the lake always maintained a cold water pool at its bottom, isolated from the scorching summer sun. The dam would release this cold water into the Sacramento River to nurture salmon eggs. But when Lake Shasta's water level dropped by 24% in 2021, that cold water pool simply evaporated. The deepest remaining water was also heated. When the dam released the water, what flowed out was no longer life, but death. The Sacramento River's temperature soared above 60, even 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Under that heat, millions of salmon eggs, nestled in the rocks, did not hatch. They were cooked right in their home river. Federal scientists recorded horrifying figures. During the drought period of 2012 to 2016 and peaking in 2021, the mortality rate of salmon eggs reached 95% to 98%. This is the image of a slow extinction catastrophe. No explosions, no smoke, just the water warming by a few degrees, and an entire generation wiped out. When the Chinook salmon disappear, it's not just the loss of a species, it's the collapse of an entire ecosystem and a deep wound for the Winnemem-Wintu tribe. For the Winnemem-Wintu tribe, salmon isn't just an economic resource, it's their identity and ancestry. In 2022, a glimmer of hope emerged when the state government and the tribe worked to bring salmon eggs back to the McCloud River, the cold waters above the dam, for the first time in 80 years. The egg bags were transported by hand, carefully handled like precious jewels. The first salmon hatched in their ancestral waters, but that recovery is as fragile as the water level of Lake Shasta itself. By 2026, when funding threatens to be cut and new dam-raising plans resurface, this hope risks being submerged under concrete once again. The salmon are the system sensor, and right now, that sensor is sounding the red. Our water system isn't just drying up farms, it's destroying what little natural remains of the West. But wait, if you look at Lake Shasta right now, you see a completely different scene. The water is a brilliant blue, full, and the waves lap against the sides of the boats. You thought the disaster was over? You thought the rain saved everything? Welcome to the deception of recovery, because in the climate of the 21st century, a full lake is sometimes more terrifying than a dry one. If you drive along Highway 5 past Lake Shasta today, you'll see a scene that's a complete contrast to the nightmare of 2021. The giant white calcareous scars are gone. The bathtub circles, seen from space, are now submerged. By May 2024, the lake will reach an astonishing 96% capacity. The spillways of the Shasta Dam will be operating at full capacity to release the water pressure from record snowmelt. California seems to have revived. The media is celebrating. Officials are raising a glass to the end of the drought. But this is when you need to be most alert. Because in an era of uncertainty, a full lake isn't a victory. It's a deceptive illusion. This rapid recovery didn't come from a clever long-term management plan. It comes from the atmospheric rivers, massive streams of moisture from the Pacific Ocean that rush inland like tornadoes. We've just won the lottery in a weather game of chance. But look deeper. The shift from 24% to nearly 100% in less than 24 months isn't stability. It's a manifestation of what meteorologists call weather whiplash. Our water system is being tossed between two extremes. And the problem is, an infrastructure built in 1945 was never designed to withstand such a sudden change. This is the paradox of recovery. When water arrives too quickly and too suddenly as rain instead of snow, Lake Shasta is forced to release water to prevent flooding. We cannot hold back that excess water for the dry years to come because of outdated operating procedures. Every gallon of water we are forced to release today to ensure the dam's safety is a gallon we will crave next year when the drought returns. Refilling the reservoir gives the public a false sense of security. It makes us forget the painful lessons of 2021. It delays system reform and keeps us consuming water as if the wet cycle will last forever. California is not only threatened by drought, it is also threatened by the short-term memory of civilization itself. The white scar has disappeared from the cliffs of Lake Shasta, but the structure of the climate has changed permanently. We are entering a regime where normal no longer exists. Behind this flashy recovery lies a far more terrifying scientific mechanism, a reality that no dam, however tall, can prevent. Because weather whiplash is more than just a change in rainfall, it's a sign that Earth is preparing for a cascading onslaught that our system has no shield against. Lake Shasta doesn't warn that California will always dry up. It warns of something far more frightening. The concept of normal is dead. We are entering the era of boom-bust climates, a weather system in a state of bipolar disorder, where the atmosphere shifts from arid to suffocatingly flood in just weeks. Engineers of the 1940s built the Shasta Dam on the assumption that nature's volatility would always remain within a familiar range, a safe boundary that concrete could control. But those boundaries have now been torn apart. To understand why a full lake is still unsafe, you must understand the difference between drought and aridification. Drought is a temporary event, a visit from a lack of rain. But aridification is a permanent change in the baseline state. As the atmosphere warms due to greenhouse gas emissions, it becomes thirstier. Each additional degree Celsius increases the potential evaporation, PET. Imagine California's water system as a bank account. The snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains is the long-term savings. The Shasta Reservoir is the daily expenditure account, and record-breaking heat waves are the negative interest. Even if you fill the account with a heavy rainy season, the negative interest from evaporation and the soaring irrigation demand due to high temperatures will drain that money faster than at any other time in history. This volatility creates a nightmare management scenario. In a boom year, atmospheric rivers pour down the equivalent of 25 Mississippi rivers combined. The aging infrastructure, designed to store meltwater from snow slowly, is now overwhelmed by sudden torrents. Water managers are faced with a dilemma. If they hold back water to prepare for drought, they risk dam failure. If they release water to prevent floods, they are throwing the future's livelihood into the ocean. As a result, we are living in a state of permanent instability. Data from tree rings and ice cores shows that what we are seeing is not a historical anomaly. It is the acceleration of an extreme cycle unprecedented in the last 1,200 years. Lake Shasta is not just a water reservoir, it is a barometer for the survival of the American West. When this giant pressure valve begins to swing between the extremes of too wet and too dry, it is signaling that the rules of the game have changed. And because nature has changed the rules of the game, humanity is forced to take action. We have delayed for a century? Accept scarcity as a long-term reality. The battle for every gallon of water is about to shift from laboratories to individual households. For decades, Californians lived with the illusion that water would always flow simply by turning on the tap. But 2024 marked a historic turning point. The water crisis shifted from an emergency response to a lifestyle reconstruction. For the first time in 150 years of battling scarcity, the state government issued an ordinance that no one could ignore. This was no longer a voluntary appeal. This was a long-term sentence, mandatory cuts. The goal was brutal. Some areas had to reduce their water supply by as much as 40% by 2040. Try doing a practical calculation right in your own home. If you use 100 gallons of water today for bathing, cooking, and watering, by 2040 you'll only have 60 gallons left. In desert oases like Palm Springs or the Coachella Valley, the reduction is 32%. In scorching inland areas like Bakersfield and Fresno, where summer temperatures frequently reach 110 degrees Fahrenheit, the pressure is immense. The places most in need of water to survive are precisely the places facing the most drastic belt-tightening measures. The system is forcing people to make unthinkable choices. Preserve lawns or preserve drinking water, maintain swimming pools, or maintain stable household bills. Water providers are attacking on three fronts. First, bans on watering plants and washing cars outdoors. Second, replacing all sanitary fixtures with extremely water-saving alternatives. And third, the most painful of all, hitting the wallet. Water prices are tiered. The more you use, the more punitive the price. But there's a harsh truth no official wants to admit. This impact isn't evenly distributed. While wealthy coastal residents can afford to maintain their lifestyles, low-income households in the scorching inland are on the brink of real scarcity. California's new normal is a water allocation system based on financial capacity. These regulations aim to save 500,000 acre-feet of water per year, enough to feed 1.4 million households. It sounds hopeful, but here's the grim truth. If Lake Shasta doesn't refill due to climate change, if the Sierra Nevada snowbank continues to fail, all your saving efforts are like trying to put a bandage on a massive crack in a failing dam. Water cuts are just a delaying tactic. We're trying to buy time while the heart of the system is already failing. And in that desperation, humanity is turning its gaze to one last solution, a multi-billion-dollar gamble to alter the very structure of the Shasta Dam. But can concrete save us once again? Or will it become the graveyard for what remains? When an outdated system teeters on the brink of collapse, human instinct is to build higher walls. In California, this single piece of tape is worth $1.8 billion. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation proposed a solution steeped in 20th century thinking, raising the Shasta Dam by 18.5 feet. In theory, this would add approximately 51,300 acres of water per year. That sounds enormous, but in reality, it's less than a 1% increase in water capacity for the entire system. $1.8 billion for a 1% chance of success. A costly gamble against a sky that has changed the rules of the game. But the real cost isn't money. Raising the dam means killing the McCloud River, the last remaining wild river protected by law. Tragically, it will permanently submerge the Kaweah Creek Cemetery, the resting place of victims of the 1854 massacre. For the Winnemem-Wintu tribe, this isn't infrastructure. It's an act of using water to erase the memory and graves of their ancestors once again. The project is caught in an endless legal battle. The federal government pushes it forward, but the state of California bans it. In 2025, despite all the controversy, millions of dollars of federal funding will still be poured into the plan. This is the clearest manifestation of systemic blindness. We believe that concrete can replace rain, and the height of the wall can compensate for the absence of snow on the Sierra peaks. Raising the Shasta Dam is not an adaptation solution. It is an act of denying reality. We are trying to expand an empty wallet, instead of accepting that the Bank of Nature has stopped supplying funds. The story of Shasta Lake doesn't end with a concrete solution, and certainly not with a lucky rain season. It ends with a cruel choice we've been putting off for nearly a century. The truth is, we're running a state of nearly 40 million people on the memory of 1945's climate. We're using a system designed for the stability of the past to confront the chaos of the future. When Lake Shasta dropped 24%, it wasn't a misreading. It was systemic failure, a systemic collapse. Predictive models were blind to a reality that no longer had any rules. The recovery window was narrowing. The system no longer had enough time to breathe amidst a cascade of disasters. California stood at a crossroads where every choice had a price to pay. Water for the city or the farm, hydropower, or the survival of the species. This was no longer a temporary drought. This is aridification, the permanent drying up of the planet. Every gallon of water is now a gamble. If it fails, the West will reach a tipping point where agriculture collapses and the power grid becomes nothing but lifeless lines. The white scar around Lake Shasta may have been submerged by 2025, but it remains there, waiting for the next upheaval to resurface. Nature never negotiates with concrete. When this giant pressure valve shakes, it signals that the old world is dead. The era of scarcity has begun. Are you ready for the day the tap stops running